Elliotte Friedman, and I quote, "I don't think we've ever seen this before. It's time for the expanded playoffs." And that was on the current playoff race in the Eastern Conference. Today is January 11th. It's actually Saturday night. I was just on a plane about an hour ago coming back from Florida, as you guys watched last week's episode. I'm Zach, ladies and gents, joined as always by Preston. Preston, I know it's a little bit late for you. Thank you for coming on for a last second recording, but how are you today?
Yeah, no problem. I'm getting a little nervous. Bills playoff game tomorrow. Knowing that we're probably gonna have to play the Ravens in the second round is not something I'm happy about. But other than that, Sabres played like shit again today.
I
Left the
was,
game with about 15 minutes left in the third period.
dude, during that game, so actually right before the game, I started an article on Jack Quinn about he's like the Sabres X factor or whatever. Apparently that's not true because he still scored in today's game and they got absolutely dismantled. So, anyways, yeah. So the NHL, there's been a lot of news that's been going on. We're gonna start off with some quick hitters here. Last weekend, Connor Zary ended up taking a knee-to-knee contact injury. It was like right past the blue line, whatever. He tried to cut inside, and now he's out indefinitely. Thankfully he avoided surgery on the knee, but he's going to be
Wow.
out for a few months. However, though, still a huge blow for Connor Zary and the Flames. He was one of their better players, and I don't want to call this hit dirty because I don't think it was blatant, but at the same time, though, it feels like any knee-to-knee hit is like avoidable in a sense, right? I mean, a lot of times we see knee-to-knee hits be like, well, I'm going to go shoulder check you, but my skates never change direction at all. So therefore, one of my legs is just out there probably 3 feet. Okay, 3 feet's a little bit over dramatic, but a few inches from where it should be, and then it just happens. And we don't really see knee to knee often, but when it happens, you can usually tell when it's blatant. I don't think this was blatant, but still, though, like any knee to knee hit is dirty at this point.
Yeah, I don't think he was intentionally trying to like hit him in the knee. I think he was just trying to get around him, and I think Zari made kind of a last second attempt to get out of the way. I mean, I think the refs got it right on the ice, calling it a major. I mean, I don't,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I don't think he was intending to injure the player because I've seen very blatant knee on knees. That didn't look like one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was still a major penalty. You can't hit a guy in the you can't knee somebody. You have to call that.
Listen, Calgary is going to be hurting without a guy like Zari. And I know Calgary has been kind of in the mix of things in terms of being in the standings. They were in the top three of the Pacific Division early in the season. They've fallen out of a playoff spot, but they're only 3 points behind Calgary as behind Vancouver as of this point. But I mean, it feels like if Calgary wants a chance that they're going to end up being in a playoff spot at some point. I thought Connor Zary and Dustin Wolf were the two guys that were going to help them. And losing one of them is frankly a huge blow. And sometimes losing a
Mm-hmm.
guy like Zari isn't as big of a deal as it would be in Calgary's instant. But the fact that Calgary has most of these guys are getting paid $7 to $10, $11 million and aren't playing up to those expectations. And with Zari having a phenomenal season like he has, I think it is a bigger blow than what maybe it should be. But right now, I know I've said this over and over again. Calgary is not the worst team in the league. I know I said that in a preseason prediction. I fuck that, whatever. But we can see Calgary kind of start to take a dip a little bit here. They're at 45 points right now in 40 games, 19, 14 to 7 record. Um, but this is a huge blow for this Calgary team.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for the kid. It looked like he was in really, really
Mm-hmm.
obvious pain. When the hit occurred. So hopefully, he has a fast recovery. I think this is a good time to pivot into a next
Mm-hmm.
little topic with Dylan Guenther. Gunther, sorry, Utah Hockey Club. He's going to be out indefinitely with a lower body injury. Man, this sucks. I feel bad for the kid. He's having a breakout season this year.
Dylan Guenther started off so hot this season. He came in, he was a little bit cold after that, but he still has 16 goals right now. Got placed on IR. This is something where it's almost like a punch to the stomach for Dylan Guenther himself because coming into the season, he was getting all this praise from all of his teammates, especially one of the leaders on the team, Clayton Keller, about this dude can put up 40, 50 goals in his sleep. And I thought maybe he'd be able to possibly touch that 40-goal mark.
I think he was going to get at least 30 this
He,
year.
he would have had 30 points if he stayed healthy. Obviously, not staying healthy here. And Utah in general is dealing with a ton of injuries, losing John Marino, Dersey, and Guenther. 3 of your top 6, 7 players on the team really does hurt. And Guenther is really more of a it's like putting salt in a wide open wound at this point for this Utah Hockey Club team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, they have a lot of really good young players up and coming. I mean, Josh Doan will get a chance to
Mm-hmm.
have another stint in the NHL. He did start the season, I believe, with Utah. Got sent down to the minors, so maybe he could have a strong impression like he did last year in Arizona when he got called up at the end of the year and was almost a point per game player.
Yeah, we'll see. Shane Doan did I just say Shane Doan?
Yeah, you did.
What it's Josh Stone. Sorry,
Josh
Josh
Stone,
Stone.
yeah.
I'm dumb. Yeah, Josh Stone got called up with this injury. So we'll see how he produces. But anyways though, we're gonna get into the thick of things. The Red Wings, when they ended up firing Derek Lalonde and brought in Todd McClellan, they got smacked by the Maple Leafs in the first game. Ever since then, the Red Wings have been on a heater. They've won 6 straight games as of this recording. The Red Wings might be back. I don't know if this is a coaching thing where it's like the coaching boost, like how the Boston Bruins had with Sacco earlier in the season, like how the Blues have had with Jim Montgomery. This could be a get juice in the locker room. Maybe this doesn't carry on to February. I know we're still 3 weeks away from that. But the Red Wings look so much better. Patrick Kane looks like a complete different player with McClellan behind the bench. And again, like overall, the team structure of the Red Wings looks better. And the goaltending looks improved. You have Dylan Larkin and Raymond. Mo Seider looks absolutely phenomenal. So we'll see where this goes. But the Red Wings claw their way out of the basement, all the way from potentially being the worst team in the Eastern Conference outside of Buffalo and both New York teams, to now they're at 42 points. They're above 500. And all of a sudden, they're back in the thick of things here for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this a bazillion times. The East is a mess, like a complete mess. I mean, Boston has been pretty inconsistent all year. I think now Boston's ceiling is probably being a wild card team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Tampa, they could finish in third with Tampa, but do you really want that spot anyway? I mean, most likely you're probably going to have to play Florida or Toronto anyway in the first round. I think Boston will lose to both of those teams. I think Tampa would lose to both of those teams as well. Columbus and Montreal, I think, have been the 2 really big surprises to me, especially Columbus. You know, we're very, very, very low on the Blue Jackets going into this season. You know, they had that horrible tragedy with Johnny Gaudreau, and you know they had every excuse in this world this year to not really play great, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of put that into perspective when we were doing our pregame picks, preseason picks, but they've seemed to have pulled them together, and they're playing like a really good cohesive team, and they look good. I mean, we'll see if they can keep this up. I think a big part of this has been the play of Zach Werenski has been phenomenal this year, and another guy I think who's going a little bit under the radar this year is Kirill Marchenko. He's been a point per game player for them quietly, and I know that nobody talks about the Blue Jackets because it's Columbus. They're not a historically great franchise. You know, they make the playoffs every once in a while. I mean, they did the funniest thing ever when they swept the Tampa Bay Lightning a few years back. But outside of that, not really any notoriety. They went all in to get a second round exit as the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. But I mean, it looks like they are starting to get on the right track on this rebuild. Sean Monahan is going to be out for a little bit of time with an injury, which is a bummer because he's been really good for them too.
The thing with not only Columbus, but every other team in the Eastern Conference is we could possibly see one team, maybe even 2 teams, depending on what's going on with Boston. Because I know they were on that hot streak with Sacco, but they ended up losing 5 or 6 games before they beat Florida today.
They
But
almost blew that too.
they ended up allowing a goal with like 1 or 2 seconds left in the third period to have Florida tie it. With the Eastern Conference, we're gonna see possibly both wildcard teams not be juggernauts. And right now, I think the pace like 84 points or 87 points, something around there, which is absolutely atrocious. And you look at all these teams that are trying to get out of this retool, rebuild phase. I'm talking to Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit. Guess you can throw Montreal in there too because they look good right now. Like, this is their prime opportunity to make the playoffs and possibly make some noise. And right now, the Ottawa, Detroit, and Montreal, they're all within 2 points of each other, 44, 42, and 41. And I think those are the three teams that have a potential shot of getting that second seed. And I know I might be counting on Pittsburgh here, but as long as you always have Crosby and Malkin, you have a shot to make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. But the fact that the floor is so low in the Eastern Conference, I think we're going to see a worse version of what happened last season, where every single Eastern Conference team decided to keep losing night in and night out. And when they were played each other, it seemed like it was far from a barn burner. It was a snooze fest. So I'm gonna ask you this, okay?
Mhm.
Is it too far to go into thinking that a team can finish with 82 points and end up finishing as the wild card 2 spot in the East with how things are going right now? Is that too dramatic?
I mean, with the way the Eastern Conference has been this year, outside of like the top teams in the conference, I would probably set the bar about 86, 87 points right now. I wouldn't go down that low to 82. I mean, but it's just kind of crazy, like how bad like the bottom half of the Eastern Conference has been. Because Washington's great, New Jersey's great, Carolina's great, I mean not Tampa, Florida and Toronto's great. I mean Tampa should be a playoff team
Mm-hmm.
just because, just in general, they've also played like way less teams than the other. Like Boston's played 45 games, Tampa's played 40. They have the same amount of points.
Mm-hmm.
So Tampa, that shows me Tampa was a better team. So I think like with these 6 spots, I think these teams should feel pretty good about where they are right now. If you're these top 6 teams in your division, this wild card is going to be a slog. Though I think the Rangers falling off the face of the earth really opened things up in the East. Because we knew New Jersey was going to be better this year.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't going to be a question.
Yeah.
Like last year, like everything that could have possibly gone wrong for them went wrong. They finally have goaltending, make a coaching change. Okay, they're back. We thought they were going to be back. Um, Boston is definitely a team I can see falling out of this. I mean, we could potentially have 3 new playoff teams in the Eastern Conference this year, which I would be very happy with. I think I get kind of sick of the same teams making the playoffs every freaking year.
It's going to be nice to possibly be able to get some new matchups too. I mean, dude, a Devils Hurricanes first round matchup is going to go bonkers off the walls if that happens. Like, I think the Metro, the top three teams are locked up. Columbus is not reaching them. And like you said, with the Rangers falling off the face of the earth, it opened up a spot for any team in the Eastern Conference and
I
inside
mean,
the
yeah, I think
Metro.
that's why Ottawa got back in that
Yeah.
conversation. I mean, Montreal's been kind of playing like way above their punching weight right now. I think. I mean, good for them. They have a really young bunch, and it looks like they're starting to get some confidence. So anything's really possible with that. Columbus, Pittsburgh is. I don't think they're a playoff team. I think they're just mid.
Hmm.
They're gonna win some games. They're gonna lose some games. Like they're competitive, but at best, they're probably like missing the playoffs by 3 or 4 points. Ottawa, I mean Ottawa, night and day difference though when Linus Armark is playing and when he's not.
Linus Hallmark right now, I believe, is still hurt, and that's the one thing that if I'm an Ottawa fan, I'm holding my breath on that what they're going through right now, like the little slump, is because Allmark's out. Because we saw before his injury, Ottawa looked like one of the best teams in the NHL for a 6-7 game stretch, and is some of that the roster of the Sens? Sure. Was most of that Allmark? I'm going to say yes because the numbers he was putting up in a 6-7 game stretch was ridiculous. And that's why I'm going to give the Senators the benefit of the doubt right now because they are without one of the best goaltenders in the league. And I think that once Allmark comes back, they're going to go on a run. And I think it's going to kick out the Blue Jackets, Canadians, or the Bruins.
I mean the one thing that I would say does concern me about Ottawa, and that this kind of proves that why they look like a different team when Allmark's not playing at his best, is they don't really score a lot of goals.
Mm-hmm.
They have a +1 goal differential right now, which speaks to how good Allmark's been playing, only allowing 118 goals this year, which has to be one of the better ones in the league. Yeah, yeah, it is one of the better ones in the league. I believe it's like top 10, right around there
Mm-hmm.
in goals against, but they're the bottom 10 for goals for. And I don't know how sustainable that is long term, especially if Allmark dealing with injuries. Like he might come back, he might not be 100% for the rest of the year. We'll see. I think Ottawa's best case is just wait and sit Allmark until he's like 100% back to healthy because I don't think this team will make the playoffs without him.
Yeah, and I'm with that. And they don't have anybody threatening them right now either, so they can sit back and they can just try to get by without Allmark too.
What do
Because
you? I mean, no, they have teams threatening them. I mean, they're not even in a
oh
wild card spot right now.
no, but by teams threatening, I mean there's not one team that's gonna fully push them out. Like if I'm Ottawa, sure, I don't want to fall back like 5, 6 points out. Like if I was at Detroit and have to claw your way back into the thick of things. But at the same time, you don't have that one team that's going to run away with the wild card spot and possibly two of them, and now you're left with, oh well, now it's hanging fruit, and you're probably not going to make the playoffs
But if
because
you keep losing though without Allmark, then you do have the chance to just push yourself out because these teams have to play each other. A lot of them are in the same division. They play each other a lot. Like someone's gonna naturally separate themselves from the pack eventually. Like this is bound to happen.
I mean, I don't disagree with you in that aspect, but if Ottawa can just stay just at 500, they'll be okay. Like maybe I don't okay. I don't see Boston pulling away from the pack. Blue Jackets, Canadians, Penguins aren't doing so. The Red Wings are back in the thick of things, right? Like, of course you don't want to sit here and lose all mark for an extended period of time because yeah, you are gonna end up losing more hockey games than you're winning. You are gonna end up falling down the standings, and sooner or later it's gonna be too late to save yourselves and try to make a playoff run. And that's the danger that you do run into Ottawa. So I'm not saying to rush him back, but I'm also saying you have time to make sure he's fully healthy. Because you're at the halfway point of the season, exactly halfway at 41 games played. You're in the middle of January. You'll be okay. And Ottawa is going to assert themselves back into that wild card too, and I possibly even the wild card one spot. I don't know how much longer Linus Allmark is out, but I don't think it's much longer. So I think they'll be okay. Like if this was an injury of Linus Allmark's going to be out 1 to 2 months, I'd be concerned if I was Ottawa. I would be like, you know what? Maybe it could be a long shot because frankly, Forsberg is not getting the job done for them. We saw them play ourselves against Buffalo the other night. He did not look good. I know Ottawa
I mean,
didn't.
The Sabres had a really good game. I will give them that, but I mean, getting shut out by the Sabres, one of the worst defensive teams in the league, is not a good look.
It's really sad, and that goes to
Yeah.
show you the offensive output that Ottawa
I
is.
mean, I believe they did kick Pittsburgh's butt today. I mean, let me look at the scores. Yeah, they beat them 5-0, but Pittsburgh's also one of the worst defensive teams in the league. They might be the worst defensive team in the league. They're up there with the Blackhawks. Just by pure goal differential. I mean, more Pittsburgh has allowed more goals scored than any other team in the league.
164 goals allowed is crazy. A minus
Yeah,
31
it's
differential is
almost a
crazy.
10 goal difference between them and the second worst.
That's pathetic. I mean, if you're Ottawa, you would expect to put up 5 or 6 goals on that Penguins team. But all in all, though, the Eastern Conference is so much different than the Western Conference. There's one thing about the Western Conference. I think the 8 teams that are in the Western Conference right now, in the playoff spot right now, are going to end up making the playoffs.
I agree
Vancouver,
with you.
I think
Yeah.
Vancouver and Colorado. Colorado's already done it, but I think Vancouver's going to slowly start pulling away from
Well,
Calgary
they're
and St.
finally starting
Louis.
to get healthy. Pedersen came back tonight, and I'm so sick of hearing all the JT Miller, Elias Pedersen stuff. Like, just shut the fuck up. They're not trading either one of them right now. Like, just chill out.
Get over yourselves. You guys are NHL players. For fuck's sakes, just play
Even
hockey.
if any of this is true, because it's still not confirmed that this is
Hmm.
actually happening. It's just a rumor that's spreading like crazy. You know, I've heard insiders talk about it, and I don't think that the Canucks view this as big as an issue as other people are making it out to be. If there is actual turmoil going on between Pedersen and Miller, I think you do whatever it takes to figure it out. But I think they will figure it out. I think that would be a mistake trading either one of them. If you're a team, this is a team that won their division last year. They almost made it to the conference final.
Hmm.
They lost in Game 7 to Edmonton. Like this is a team with Stanley Cup aspirations, and you're not winning a Stanley Cup without either of those players.
Those are two of 3 or 4 of your most vital players on the team, and the fact that there's even rumors about trading either JT Miller or Elias Pettersson. It's ridiculous. And if the Canucks went out and traded one of them, I don't care who the fuck you get back in return. You're not winning a Stanley Cup because you're not getting back enough pieces that's gonna replace Pettersson in their top six or JT Miller. Like, though they're worth more than just a one for one on most levels on most
Oh,
teams.
You mean JT Miller's not worth Mika Zibanejad 1-for-1?
Dude, that we can get into that because that might have been the most ridiculous trade, like actual trade I've seen. Like I see mock trades, whatever, from like couch CMs, whatever. Like take that with a grain of salt. Chris Drury is a fucking idiot.
I think he has a real problem of overvaluing his players. I mean, I think he's panicking right now because I think his job's on the line. I think if they do not make the playoffs, I think Peter Laviolette is fired and Chris Drury is fired. I think they clean house.
Oh, you have to.
Yeah, because I mean, the way this team is just falling off the cliff is unacceptable. I mean, we've talked about the Rangers a bunch in the past. You know, Shesterkin did miss some time, but even he, I mean, for his standard, hasn't really been that good this year. You know, barely over 900 save percentage, over 3 goals against average. This is the worst. He's on track to have the worst season in his career, and it's not close.
The fact that are we pivoting over to the Rangers right now, or are we stick with the Canucks because
I mean, I think it's up to you, but I mean, I think Chris Drury is panicking. I think the way he handled the Jacob Trouba thing was not a good
it was
look.
horrible?
I think the best case for going forward, I think, is just for the Rangers to move on from him.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be the last season of we see Chris Drury and Laviolette. And I remember we were talking about the Igor Shesterkin stuff, and we're like, if he doesn't end up getting Shesterkin signed at all, if Shesterkin end up walking, like Drury's done, he is not going to be the Rangers GM. Well, there's a second option. The Rangers just fucking suck. Like that's the second option here. Like, could you throw a little bit of it on coaching? Sure. Could you throw it a little bit on the roster building? Sure. That's
I
why.
mean, their star players have not been good this year. Like outside, Panarin has been good. I mean, Panarin's I think is one of the best players in the league. He's also
For
missed some
sure.
time this year. Zibanejad has been awful this year, especially for what they're paying him. Chris Kreider also not been very good this year. Uh, Richard Trocheck, not been very good this year. Let's look at Adam Fox stats. He's not having a horrible season, but for his standards, it's not been good. Usually he's around a point per game guy, which is a high standard. I
Yeah.
understand, but he's a Norris winning defenseman, and you depend on those guys. I think part of it is like when your star players aren't playing like stars, you suffer, and then Shesterkin looks pedestrian. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Keandre Miller. He's just I don't know what the Rangers do. Like I don't know why they're so bad at developing young players. Because just, I mean, Alexis Lafreniere has not really been good this year either. It looks like he might be taking somewhat of a step back. And they just gave him a pretty long contract.
I
The
have
cap hit's not too bad. A 7.4 is not bad.
No, it's not. But like he has to perform a 7.4, and it's not just Lafreniere. It's the entire team. And what is happening with the Rangers is screaming a culture issue. It's screaming a locker room issue, and I think it comes down to more than Drury. And I know for a fact Drury and Laviolette are gone if the Rangers don't end up picking up
Oh
making
yeah,
the
I think
playoffs,
that's
right? Like,
obvious. Yeah.
like Drury, I get he was handcuffed in the offseason because he didn't have a ton of cap space, I
Well,
believe.
you also had a team that just made it to the conference final and won a President's Trophy.
So are you insisting that he should have tried to add at least one other piece, or like it's not
I
his
think it was
fault?
a combination of Well, it is his fault. He's the GM. He's been the GM for years, but he's the one that built that roster.
Hmm.
But I think it's a situation of you don't have a ton of cap space, right? You know you need to re-sign Igor Shesterkin. You know that is priority number one, no matter what. You have a team that just lost in the Eastern Conference Final last year, won a President's Trophy. I mean, he wouldn't be wrong for thinking like we can run it back. You know, if this is not a very different team than the team they had last year, just on paper. And you know, you couldn't really say he was wrong in thinking that. A lot of people I mean, I don't think anyone had them missing the playoffs this year.
you could look at it like this. Like what the Rangers did last season, winning a President's Trophy, it was great. Eastern Conference Finals, I thought that run was a little bit unsustainable because Shesterkin carried them until he finally couldn't
Well,
anymore
I
because he
think
was
the
getting
warning
killed.
signs showed up there
They
in the
did.
playoffs, where like their superstars were disappearing. Shesterkin kind of carried the load. I think honestly, if Carolina doesn't collapse in the second round, I think they would have came back and won that series in seven.
Carolina
Honestly,
was the better team in that series.
they
Carolina
just couldn't
was.
score. They just couldn't
Yeah.
score.
The,
Yeah,
the,
because
the,
Shesterkin was like playing out of his mind.
the difference in that series, I've talked about it before, was the Hurricanes couldn't score against Shesterkin, and the Hurricanes didn't have another guy to go toe to toe with Shesterkin goaltending wise. So if you're Drury, you look at the second round series against Carolina and the Eastern Conference Finals against Florida, and you thought that that team was good enough to replicate what they did last season. I know they've made the playoffs the year before too, but the fact that the warning signs were there, like you said, it was very unsustainable with their power play. Like when their power play was not good, the Rangers lost games. Like I know special teams can win a lot of hockey games. I know it's obvious as hell that if you score a power play goal, if your power play
I
is
mean,
good,
look at the Oilers last year in the playoffs. That power play carried them to the Stanley Cup final.
exactly. And the difference that the Oilers have from the Rangers is that sure, I could be a hypocrite in saying that the Edmonton Oilers team roughly stayed the same except a few additions, but the Rangers don't have Connor McDavid and Liam fucking Draisaitl on their team. Like that's the difference here. And Artemi Panarin is a premier player in the league. He is one of the best in the league, one of the best wingers in the league. And the signs of Mika regressing showed. And Chris Drury saw the playoffs last year and decided to sit on his hands and did nothing. And I get he was cap tied a little bit, but there's other GMs in the league that would look at that and are cap tied and would make moves around it. The Colorado Avalanche, I believe, at some point last offseason, had 12 guys under contract with about $1 million in cap space, and they made it fucking work. So it's not an excuse for Drury to sit here and be like, well, we were $800,000 away from the cap ceiling. We didn't really have any work to do, and we have to
I
say
mean, but he made that team. Like
exactly.
that's his team. And like I think Victor Trocheck kind of went kind of psycho mode last year. I think he had a much that was probably going to be the best year of his career.
Oh yeah, by
And,
far.
another thing I know we've hammered this point before too is just the whole thing with Capo Caco and that situation where they traded him and that you trade for like a bottom pair defenseman who's not been good this year. And Capo, good for him. I'm happy he got out of New York. I think he's gonna thrive in Seattle. He scored 2 goals today against the Sabres, so he already has 7 points in 10 games as a Seattle Kraken, which is almost as much as he's had this year with the Rangers.
It's a locker room issue for the Rangers, and it's
Well,
all
I like
crumbling.
they don't develop talent
Hmm.
well with the young players. Like I mean, Philip Cheadle is okay. He was an untouchable player. When I remember when Jack Eichel was on the trade block for the Sabres, and there was rumors flying around the Rangers were interested, and they had like 6 or 7 untouchable players. So like and I thought most of that was rumors, but I don't think it is. I think Chris Drury really does overvalue his players. But then you let him go, and once you don't like him anymore, you just kind of dump him for nothing, like with Jacob Trouba and Capo Caco. Like once they fall out of favor, whether you just treat them like shit and throw them to the side of the street.
I I'm gonna make some stupid analogy, so it's completely away from sports. Chris Drury with Rangers players he loves is like an overprotective boyfriend of his girlfriend, whatever, right? But then the
Hmm.
second that he gets bored, he dumps him for another chick, and then it happens over and over and over again. And that's what's happening with Drury. And the fact that Capo Caco is thriving in Seattle, I love it. I absolutely love it. Since 2019, the Rangers have not been able to naturally develop talent. Most of these young guys that come in and perform well on the Rangers have had to rely on natural talent, and that should not happen in the NHL at all.
Like I think the next player, the young player that needs to get out of New York is Keandre Miller. I think this kid is a really great defenseman, and he is suffocating right now in that Ranger system. It's clearly not for him because you go from your first couple of years you look solid, then your third year 79 games 43 points as a young defenseman. That's really good. Last year, 80 games, 30 points. Not he takes a step back this year. He only 7 points in 35 games. He's a -6. He's taking another step back. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with him. I don't know if it's just him personally or it's the system or the coaching or the culture. But I think the best thing for him is to kind of get on out of there, get a change of scenery. I don't think the Rangers want to trade him because he does have value, and I think on a trade market he would get a lot of eyes on him. He's a 24-year-old left-handed defenseman. Uh, with a lot of offensive upside. I think there's a market for a player like that, and I don't know if he'll ever develop into the player he can be with the Rangers. I mean, you're getting to the point now where he's not really a young player anymore, and what you got is what you got. So for his case, I think he's looking for like me. I need to find my game, and I might need to find it somewhere else.
I'm going on Evolving Hockey right now, and I'm going through Keandre Miller's stuff and everything. So his rookie season was a 2020-2021 season, whatever.
Hmm.
So he was great offensively. Defense is non-existent, but I'm like
And he
his
did need to develop his defensive game. Like
and
that
he
was an
did
issue.
his second season. He was phenomenal defensively. Expected goals above replacement was at like 7.5. Like that's good, but every single season I'm looking through, it's declining by a few percentiles. It goes from 87 to 67 between 22 to 23, and then and this season like he's at a 74 percentile like he's suffocating. And him and Lafreniere, I think, are the two culprits outside of Capo Caco that have really suffered from the horrible development that is the New York Rangers.
I think with Lafreniere is like he was the first overall pick in his draft for a reason. The kid's talented, and I think he's doing his best. Like I think last year when you saw him like look like he's taking that next step to becoming like living up to being a first overall pick, I think that was him despite the Rangers. I think that's just his natural talent showing, right?
Yeah.
And just one more thing I want to bring up about Keandre Miller is I don't remember who they were playing, but a few weeks ago, like they ended up like he gave up a really really bad goal. It was all his fault. I think they were tied or it was like up by a goal, and Miller had the puck in the corner. He was just holding on to it and didn't know what to do with it, and he just ends up giving it away. And 2 seconds later, the puck's in the back of their net. I think they were playing the Hurricanes. So like he just looks broken right now.
I kind of feel bad for some of those players in the locker room that,
I
like
mean,
the
I don't feel
younger
too
ones.
bad. They're a lot of them get paid millions of dollars. You can't feel too bad about guys that are millionaires.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Get over
personally, yeah,
yourselves.
they could be doing better for themselves right now in a different situation. And I think the Rangers really have to bring in a fresh face as a coach. They've been kind of hiring like these grizzled vets these last few years, which don't have a great history of developing young players. Gerard Gallant was really, really bad with the young
That was
players.
horrible.
Yeah, and he was like ruining Lafreniere and Kako and all these really young players. And Drury saw that and knew he had to move on from him. Laviolette isn't much better. He's a respected coach. He's a good coach. He's not a coach would I have a lot of really young stud prospects.
I'm with you. And sticking with some playoff format, because Elliotte Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast was talking a little bit about the Eastern Conference playoff race and how it's just a mush. It's just like 6, 7, 8 teams in the middle of this
Nobody
thing.
wants it.
Nobody wants it, correct. What do you guys think of the NHL expanding the playoff format and whether it's a play-in round like how the NBA does? Because Elliotte Friedman, I believe he ended up saying that the NHL should go to a play-in format like that.
Was he
Or
just like spitballing ideas, or was like there's
no,
actual rumors
this
floating
no
around?
okay. This isn't like complete like
This is just him
rumors.
like making up Elias Pettersson to the Sabres, right?
Let me check
Because
that
he
for
was
you.
a menace for that. He should have never said that.
He started a full-on fucking rumor mill, dude. I mean,
Just
granted,
because he
it's
had an idea of a trade.
and he came up with it on the spot.
Yeah, no, he
Um,
should not have said that.
Okay, apparently Friedman loves a 20-team playoff format. Fuck out of here.
No.
Um, March. Okay. Where is? It's January.
When it comes to playoffs, I'm of the opinion that I think the playoffs should be really hard to make. I like how like in the MLB does it. Like it's hard to make the playoffs in the MLB. the NFL, it's hard. It used to be hard until they got the 7 seed. A 7 seed should not exist in the NFL. It was hard to make the playoffs. Like, you have 32 teams in the league, only 12 of them make the playoffs. Like, that's little, very little. And it should be hard to make the playoffs. I mean, in the NHL, over half the league makes the playoffs
Yeah.
already. Usually, the wild card teams get bounced immediately. Every once in a while, you get a situation like Florida, or like the Kings, like 10 years ago. A lot, it was more than geez, time's flying.
2012 or whatever it was.
Yeah, when they
14.
were the 8 seed and they ended up winning the Stanley Cup. It happens, but I think the playoffs should be harder to make. I think you get better playoff hockey. You get more intense matchups. Because usually I would say the real playoffs start for the NHL usually in the second round.
So so he did actually say it on the podcast, 32 Thoughts, whatever. But so this is his exact quote. So Elliotte Friedman, and I quote, "I don't think we've ever seen this before. It's time for the expanded playoffs." And that was on the current playoff race in the Eastern Conference. So I don't know if that's him talking about a full-on play-in format where like how the NBA has it, because that's been ever
The
since.
playing in the NBA is a joke. You get a 10 seed fucking team in the conference playing the NBA playoffs are a joke in general.
I think the playing around is honestly not that bad. Like, okay, I get why there's pushback on it, because if generally when you're a 7 or 8 seed, you're in the playoffs, right? But now you're not in the playoffs if you're a 7th or 8th seed. You have to possibly, if you're the 7th seed, you lose to the 10th seed. The 10th seed that finishes in the regular season can make the playoffs. And the reason, there's a reason that the NBA did the playoff format was strictly because of money. It wasn't because of what the NHL was going through right now. And I think what's happening with the NHL right now is not going to happen ever again. Okay, I don't want to say ever again, but we're not going to see something where we see 8 or 9 playoff teams within 6 to 7 points of each other like this again. Like, it's just an anomaly. And if the NHL goes into the next CBA, I believe it's 2026, if I'm not mistaken, the NHL would be mistaken to go into that CBA talk and be like, listen, let's expand playoffs. Because I can almost guarantee you, I don't know off the top of my head, that the NHL has talked about this before. And if we haven't had expanded playoffs by now, with how 2020 to 2021 happened with the shortened season and then the bubble season in 2021, I don't think we're ever going to get it. And I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think if the NHL was going to do it, it would have already happened by now.
I mean, I think there's a very strong reason for the NHL to want to do this is money. Playoff revenue is
Yes.
extremely high, especially in NHL. You get more advertising money, more people watching the game. Tickets are more expensive for the games, and yada yada yada. But I don't want to see bad teams in the playoffs. I just don't like it. Like in the NBA, like last year, for instance, you had a team that was considered a playoff team because they made the play-in round that was 36-46. Should
Yeah.
a team that was a 10 games under 500 even have a chance to make the playoffs? No, I don't
Who
think that should be a thing.
who were, because so do you have the NBA standings up right now for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So last year in
So
the Eastern Conference, there were two teams that made the play-in round that both had losing records.
did either snag the 7th or 8th seed at all?
No, thankfully not, because they shouldn't have even been qualified to even try to get into the playoffs
Yeah.
to begin with, which proves my point. I mean, in the Western Conference, that things were a little different. Like it was actually pretty close.
That's
But
the
in the East, but I don't like it. I just don't like it. And then most of the time these low seed playoffs that make it through the play-in round, they just get swept in the first round.
That's the thing with the NBA playoffs compared to the NHL ones. We've seen it where even before the play-on round, you would have a team that be at 500, maybe a game or two below 500, be the 8th seed or 7th seed, because the NBA is so top heavy. And the
The NBA
fact
is a
that
joke. Like the
and on
regular
top of
season
it,
does not matter in the NBA.
no, it doesn't. Like this whole load management thing, like, oh my god, I woke up with the sore back, I can't play tonight. Sit the fuck down.
I'm just
Um,
saying the regular season in the NBA literally doesn't matter. Nobody cares about
no,
the
it
regular
doesn't.
season.
It doesn't. You
It's the
just
same
coast
damn
into the
teams that make it
playoffs.
almost every year, and then the playoffs are where it actually matters.
But that's also kind of the issue with the NHL right now, is most of the same teams make it every year, except maybe the 2 or 3 new teams, at least as of late.
Well,
And
that tells me teams aren't drafting well. I don't think the NHL has as big of a problem as the NBA when it comes to getting players to smaller markets. I think there are a few teams in the NHL that's a team specific issue, like the Sabres. Like they just are really, really bad. Why
Yeah.
would any team like have been historically bad for a long
Hmm.
time? Why would a team want to come there? But I mean, players are willing to go to Winnipeg. I mean, Columbus has gotten free agents. Calgary, you have teams like that are not in really high destination areas for play people to want to live in. But winning goes a long way. And the NBA, you have these teams that have like this historical greatness, or like Los Angeles, Boston, New York, that just automatically they should be good every year just by default. But I think we're getting too deep into the NBA thing right now. I can go on forever though. I think the NBA is a joke. I think they're on a decline. I think the NHL has a really good prime opportunity next few years to kind of take over as the second most popular. Well, I don't know how popular baseball is ratings wise. I mean, I
Ratings
know
wise, the MLB is fourth.
so they're behind the NHL.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I mean they play like a bazillion games in baseball. It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to
Their
even
playoffs are
be a
one of the
casual
highest
fan.
rating ones, but the regular season's I think
Oh,
fourth.
I think
Whatever.
playoff baseball is awesome. I think the thing that makes playoff baseball awesome is only the good teams make it.
Yes, correct. And even with them adding expanding the playoffs, whatever, it's still been exciting baseball. Like you still have a 90-win team being a wild card team, and they're facing off against a team that only has 5 or 6 wins more, but it's good baseball. And like compared to the NBA and NHL, like brought up earlier with the NHL, we usually don't see a wild card team upset the number one seed in the division, and it's frankly because the wild card teams right now are finishing with 97 to 95 points, except the second spot in the Eastern Conference. It's like 5 points at this point. Um, but then, like the,
5 points, that would be pretty crazy.
but like the top team in each division is finishing with like 110 points, 108 points. Like it's just so lopsided, and that's the thing with the NBA and NHL. It's like it's so lopsided up top, and
I think this might be a hot take. What I'm about to say. I think at this point, I'm so against expanding the NHL playoffs. I'd rather make it even. I'd rather just give like the top seeds buys and just have less teams make the playoffs. Like honestly, I'd rather do that than have a fucking play-in round.
are we going to a just top three in each division make the playoff or make the playoffs? Or are we going like top six each conference, first and second seed get a bye? Let's do two series on the East and Western Conference. Play every other night. We have one game prime fucking time type of deal.
Yeah, you can either do that or like the NFL does it, where the one seed just gets a first round bye, like the conference winner gets a bye. I'd be okay with that too. I just don't want bad teams in the playoffs. That's all I don't want. And yeah, I'm very against play-in rounds. I think it encourages mediocrity, and teams are going to
Mm-hmm.
push well, we might make the play-in, and then we could make the real playoffs and maybe win a game in the playoffs. Like, no, fuck you. You're either good or you're not.
The NHL keeping it at 8 teams perfectly fine, and
I
we
wouldn't be mad if they kept it 18s. I think they need to change the way the works. I hate the divisional format. I think it should go back to 1 through 8. I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's a pretty popular opinion
mm-hmm.
on the league. The NHL is going to do that. I think they like to encourage. That's the one thing I would say. Like the NHL does a good job of. The NFL does a better job than anybody
Mm-hmm.
about than anybody other like with this is making rivalries important,
Yes, and
because
like
that's a big part of sports, and I think the NBA is like absolutely killed rivalries just in general. Like I've just been shitting on the NBA for like the last 20 minutes. But when in hockey, like when the Leafs play the Bruins, like that matters,
yes.
right? 'Cause, I mean, historically they've had a rivalry forever, but like they play each other in the playoffs every year for the most part. Like there's real bad blood between those teams, right? Like they like back in the day when Colorado and Detroit used to have a huge, ridiculous rivalry. Like they were like there would be
They
bloodbaths every
quite
game.
literally would kill each other.
Yeah, like I think the NHL does like I think that's part of the reason why like I don't disagree with this is it makes the rivalries matter in the NHL, right? You want rivals to be important. It's a way to keep fans engaged and get more eyes. Like when you see two teams that are really good that just don't like each other, you want to watch it, right?
Exactly. Like you get the same matchups over and over again, and it creates the rivalries. And the NHL, this is going to be the one gripe that people might have with the 1 through 8 because I want to see different matchups over and over again. It's not going to create as many like early playoff round
I really
rivalries.
don't want to see Toronto Boston again. I really don't want to see that anymore.
Right now, they
I
would
get
still
it's
be facing if it was 1 through 8.
Yeah, and for somehow Toronto would find a way to fucking blow it.
Yes, yeah. Like they're tied with New Jersey right now, but they have one game in hand on New Jersey, so therefore they have the tiebreaker over points percentage. But like right now, 1 through 8, Capitals, Blue Jackets, Leafs, Bruins, Devils, Lightning, Hurricane, Panthers. I think that's fine. Because then
Hmm.
you lead in the rivalries. If you reseed, you lead into the better series later in the playoffs, and that's what all of us are asking for. Like it's great. The middle of April comes around. I'm stoked for the playoffs because we get Boston. We get Boston, Toronto. We could get the Devils, Hurricanes. We can get Colorado, Winnipeg, Dallas play each other. One of those teams, whatever. But then if you go to the 1 through 8, you'll get those series later in. You'll get the better teams later in later in the playoffs. And you might even get an upset too because it sounds better when a 7 seed goes like Boston, for example. If they upset Toronto over, well, they're the third team in the Atlantic Division and they upset the second team in the Toronto Maple Leafs and they're like 4 points separating them, whatever, for example. Like it sounds better when a 7 seed upsets a 2 seed.
I mean, I guess. I mean, I don't think it's really too much different than a 8 seed upsetting a 1 seed. I mean, yeah, I don't really find it too different. I mean, unless you have like last year with Tampa like being the clear cut
Yeah.
wild card one, and it wasn't even close with wild card two. So like, if the Capitals would have beat the Rangers, that would have been might have been the second biggest upset in history. I think the number one was always going to be either Blue Jackets over Tampa or Florida over Boston.
And the only reason the Blue Jackets over Tampa is number one in my eyes is because Tampa, at the time, ended up having the best regular season in NHL
I
history.
mean, but Boston did too. But
Yeah, and
Boston
then they
blew a
blew a
3-1
3-1 lead.
lead.
But then that Florida team, I think the Blue Jackets one was worse because at least the Panthers the year before, they made the President's Trophy.
Oh, I think the
Fired.
Bruins is way worse. Blowing a
Really?
3-1 lead to an 8 seed
Oh, okay, okay.
after you have the greatest regular season of all time.
I think
It's like it's
I
up there
get
with
where
like
you're
the
coming from.
Patriots losing to the Giants in the Super Bowl. Like,
I get where
you
you're coming from, but the Panthers that was the same team that won the President's Trophy, except with a
I
different
get what you're
coach.
saying, but when you're up 3 games to 1 in a playoff series and you're the 1 seed in in the league and you're playing the team that made the playoffs like the second last day of the season, you should win that series.
Okay, I agree that they should have won this series. I'm not saying it's inexcusable because the Bruins had that series in the bag too. In Game 5, they
Oh,
were
they
this close
blew
from
it.
winning it too.
No,
So,
they completely blew it.
so I think if the Capitals somehow ended up upsetting the Rangers, that would. I personally,
That would have been a shock
I
because
think
the Caps
Drury
were
would have
just
been
straight up
fired on.
bad. They,
Dude, they had the worst goal differential of any playoff team in NHL history. Drury would have been fired. He was not. He was not leaving. He was not getting on the plane back to New York.
I think the fans would have tried to kill him.
That would have been.
Rangers
I'm all
fans are
for it.
very, very passionate. They're very outspoken, and I know they're not probably they're probably not happy with Chris Drury right now.
Okay. Before we end things off here, I'm gonna bring up a hypothetical. Okay.
Okay.
Let's petition. Okay, we can't petition or whatever, but let's root for Columbus to get the first wild card seed, right? And then they have
Okay.
to play Toronto in the playoffs. You know, it'd be fucking hilarious. Columbus going into Scotiabank Arena and beating the Maple Leafs in the best of 7 series in the first
I
round.
mean, I think it'd be funny whenever Toronto loses in the first round because I always think it's funny when Toronto loses.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this Toronto team is honestly different enough. I
Mhm.
think they are going to win the first round playoff series unless something crazy happens or injuries happen or they end up having to play Florida in a 2-3 matchup, which I don't think happens
I think
because either Florida or Toronto is winning the Atlantic Division.
if Toronto for somehow if Toronto and Florida, okay, those two are finishing 1 and 2, so they're not going to face each other in the first round. So Toronto will make it out, but I wonder though. Um, no, I'm not wondering. Toronto will beat Florida. No, sorry. Toronto will beat Tampa if they fall to 2. They'll beat Boston. They'll beat Columbus. They'll beat any wildcard team. So yeah. Toronto. I highly doubt that they're going to be first round exit with how good they are this season. They have goaltending now.
I think Toronto and Florida is destined to be a second round matchup.
I think that's going to be electric stuff. I've
That should be a
enjoyed.
really good series, but I still right now I give Florida the edge
Yeah,
just because the experience they have. I think Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz have been good, really good for the
Mhm.
Maple Leafs. It's just the Panthers are just different. Playoff Bob is different.
The Panthers just coast in the regular season, and they turn it up a second notch in the playoffs. Actually, three
I
notches.
mean, they're so well coached. They're so
Hmm
what they do everything right, and they know that like you said, they know when to turn it on.
For sure. It's going to end it for today's episode. If you guys enjoy all of our content, all of our socials are down below, as well as the subscribe button. If you guys are listening on Apple and Spotify, head over to our YouTube for more exclusive content. Subscribe there as well. See you guys in our next episode.